I'm Phil, and as many of you know, I've been part of River Church for a couple of years now. I love the Bible. I was thinking about it this week, I've just got a great affection for you guys. I just really like being part of this community. So we're going through James, the book of James. It's in the New Testament. It's written by the brother of Jesus to the church. It's kind of like a New Testament book of wisdom. So it's talking about what it means to live out faith. We're in chapter 3, end of chapter 3 and beginning of chapter 4 this week. But before we go any further, I just want to sort of do a little bit of like a exercise to help illustrate something really important. So I don't know about anyone else, but when I was a bit younger, I found that I didn't understand a lot of things about the Bible, and lots of things in life left me with big questions. Obviously now it's all different, I'm a bit older. Now I realise that half the things I thought I knew I didn't understand, and there's even more things I don't understand. But something which helped me to, I guess, navigate my way through life at the time was setting some foundational sort of goggles, lenses through which I looked at life through. And so I brought those with me today. So thank you very much to Cheryl for lending me her bricks. So these foundational lenses. God is bigger than you think. He is better than you think. And he loves you more than you think. These are just really important foundational truths about the nature of God. Is if you think that you got to the end of his bigness, you haven't. He's bigger than any problems. Anything's going on in the world right now, he's bigger than them. If you think that you've got to the end of his goodness, you haven't. There's more and more and more and more. And if you think that there's something you've done that means that he can't love you, or that he might love you less, or that he's disappointed in you, it's not true. Because he loved you while you were still a sinner, while you were still far away. This is important foundational truth. The next layer of foundations is that you are saved by grace and grace alone. It's not by anything that you have done that you are saved, that you have found salvation. It cost you absolutely nothing. It cost him everything. Okay? But today is all about walking it out. I should be an artist. I've missed my calling in life. But it's really important. And the reason I'm just going to leave this here, because I don't actually want to dwell on all of this, because that's not the point. The point, what we're talking about this bit today. But if I just came out and said this bit over here, it's really easy to get into legalism of thinking, I have to do, like, to get this message that it's something which is in culture, is like the idea that Christianity is about being a good person. It's not. We have a good person. We're following a good person. Christianity is about realizing that there is a God who is big, who is good, and who loves us, who has saved us by grace. And from that place, from those foundations, we respond to it. Okay. So hopefully this won't fall down. Yeah. And this is where James is talking about from too. So he was writing to people he knew, and he'd known them for a long time. They already knew these bits. He'd been talking about this with them for ages. This is his letter of like this condensed, like punchy, like right. You know the foundations. You know who God is. You know you're saved by grace. This is how you live it out. And if we take that by itself, it can sound like the emphasis is wrong. But just if you ever think, as I'm going through, I need to do something to get God to love me. Just look back at this bottom there. And another thing about this is that this isn't all-inclusive. This isn't everything about faith. There's lots more to discover. And also, none of these are actually more important than the others. It's the whole picture together. So when we're looking at this, it's the whole thing. It's not that this is more important than this. It's just that it's the order of which you understand it. So if we have this on the bottom, it's not going to work. It's going to shape your picture of who God is. Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions. So we're looking at the James 3:13 all the way to James 4 verse... I should really know this off by heart. I think it's verse 12. So as we're going to read through it, and as we're going through, I've got a bunch of questions which is going to help us to explore the text. So the first question is, what does it mean to be wise? So James is a book of wisdom. It builds heavily off Proverbs and the Sermon on the Mount, which is Jesus' sermon in Matthew. So what does it mean to be wise? What is godly wisdom, and how is it different from earthly wisdom? Verse 13, who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. Who is wise? Straight out of the gates, then, James is telling us two things about wisdom. Number one is that wisdom is living out your faith by your actions. And number two, it's got something to do with meekness or humility. We'll be talking about both of these things. So 14, if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So James is setting up these two ways of living. Okay? So there's wisdom from the earth and wisdom from above. So what's the difference? Wisdom from the earth, from the world around us, it is self-serving. So it puts us, me, first. It talks about here in verse 14, jealousy and selfish ambition in the heart. It may even look good sometimes, but the heart that drives it is a heart of, I'm going to take that for me. It's also built on things which are doomed to pass away. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians 2. He talks about this value system, the whole value system that the world is built on, what matters in the world. It's all on things which are doomed to pass away. So it's on money. You can't take money with you. On fame. You can't take fame with you. It's built on sort of status or power. All these things, you're gone afterwards. You can't take these things with you. And ultimately, it leads to destruction. So what do we mean by that, leading to destruction? So earthly wisdom says what we want to hear for selfish gain. Where jealousy and self-service exist, ultimately, it creates something which is unstable and will fall over. Does anyone... Well, a few of you were here at my last preach in Abraham. We talked about seeing and taking. Does anyone remember that? Yeah? So the idea that there's this theme which runs all the way through the Bible about, like, you see what looks good in your own eyes and you take it. And that's what happened to Adam and Eve. It happens all the way through loads of different characters in the Bible. And that's like the root of it leads to death. It leads to separation from God. When we see it and we say, I don't trust you, God, to say what's good and bad. I'm going to decide what's good and bad in my own eyes, and I'm going to take it for myself. And that is earthly wisdom in a nutshell. And we are so surrounded by this sort of like, almost like a bath of earthly values. It's surrounded in our culture all the time. It's reinforced in social media, in the news, in our education systems, in our politics, in our workplaces. Everything around us is so immersed in these earthly value systems of seeing and taking, of self-centeredness, of valuing things which are they're gonna die with time. That we probably don't realize all the time how much it infiltrates our thinking. But what is God's wisdom then? So God's wisdom it's from above. So he talks about, even James, earlier in James, he talks about every good gift comes from above. Here in this passage, he talks about wisdom from above. So it's coming from God. It's not coming from the earth. I mentioned Paul talking about 1 Corinthians 2, about things doomed to pass away. Paul also talks about wisdom from above as well. He talks about the value system of heaven, the value system of God. It's the value system of the earth completely tipped on its head. It's not doomed to pass away because it's built on things which are everlasting. In a nutshell, it's living your life for an audience of one. In every moment in your life, there's only one person who really matters, and that's God. And that matters, and that lasts forever, because God lasts forever. There's this thing which happened to my dad when he was probably about my age, actually, working in a company, and his boss came to him and he said, "What motivates you, money or power?" And he was basically seeing how he could control my dad by sort of giving him what he thought my dad wanted. And my dad kind of looked at him and said, "Well, neither of those." And he was like, "There has to be one of the two. That's what motivates everyone, is money or power." And my dad said, "Well, actually, I'm motivated by living my life before Jesus." And this really bothered my dad's boss. And actually, I think it really, from the sounds of things, he really hated my dad after that. And it actually went out of his way to try and sort of torpedo my dad's career. Didn't work, but so God looked out for Dad anyway. But I think there's one other thing I'll probably say which I'd add to that now. It's money, power, or hedonism. So nowadays, I think a lot of us kind of realize that money and power are things which we can see how they fall away. Like, because today's economic situation and like the cost of living and the fact that actually most people don't, like the promises that society says is if you work hard, stay by the system, take what you can, you'll get that money and power in the end. For most people, we realize it doesn't work out like that. So there's this now new sort of spirit of the age is living for yourself, live for the moment, live for it's all about getting as much pleasure as you can from every single second, because these promises that society tells us, they'll never come, so we might as well just live for right now. Again, it's like dust. It slips away from your hands. It doesn't have any substance. But what has God prepared for those who love him? A greater prize, the knowledge and revelation of the Spirit of God in this life and the ever after. That's something which you can grab a hold of and it will hold on to you. It's pure, it's unsullied by world values. It's peaceable. We are not at war within ourselves. We haven't got 1 foot in the earth and 1 foot in heaven. We've got 2 feet with Jesus. And we are not serving 2 masters, but fully aligned with God. Let me tell it another way. My mum used to talk about sort of these 2 dogs within you, a good dog and a bad dog, and the one that you feed will grow bigger. Jesus tells it another way. Story of the farmer and the seeds on different types of ground is a parable he tells. And there's this farmer who puts seeds out onto stony ground and thorny ground and onto rich soil. And the seeds on the stony ground, they go surface deep and they don't grow. The seeds on the thorny ground, they grow up and get choked by all the lies of the world. But the seed that goes onto the rich soil will grow up in a ripe harvest and multiply 100-fold. So what is planted within your heart will grow. So reset and plant your heart and values in different soil, in God's wisdom. So what is living out your faith by your actions? This is 4 verses 1. So what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You keep having fights. Your passions are at war. You're split between 2 masters. You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you don't ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your own passions. So he's really referring back here to the words that Jesus uses in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus talks about a lot in hyperbole, which is when he exaggerates a concept to an extreme to make a point. So Jesus talks about calling someone a fool is like murdering them. And it's this idea that what comes first in your heart, calling you a fool, if you pursue that, it will grow and grow and grow and grow. And it's the same spirit that then causes you to murder someone. And so he's also talking about sort of you don't have because you don't ask, because we don't maybe trust that God is bigger, better, and loves us more. Or we ask, but we're asking for ourselves. We're asking from a self-serving, taking and seeing and taking what looks good in our own eyes, rather than I want to live before an audience of one and say, what matters in your eyes, God? I want to pursue that. James doesn't mince his words here. You adulterous people. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose that it is no purpose that the Scripture says, he yearns jealously over the Spirit that he has made to dwell in us? So he's saying that your love is split in two. You're caught between the world and God. Do you not know that God cares about your heart as a temple for his Spirit? He yearns and jealously of you. He wants to be in relationship with you. I work in the medical field, and one way I was thinking about would maybe sort of make sense of this is this analogy of the heart and the hand being connected. So they're both parts of me, but imagine that you went into A&E because you had fallen over and broken your wrist. And your hand is like the things you do, your actions, your living out. And when you're in A&E, they do some tests and they find out that the reason that you fell in the first place and broke your hand is because you've got a problem with your heart, where things reside, where things come from, your innermost being. And they find out, after chatting to you a bit more and doing some more digging around, they find out the reason your heart's not healthy is because your hand has been feeding it all the wrong stuff. Your hand feeds your heart, directs your hand. There's a connection between the two here. And that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit more in a second. So the next question is, before we talked about like meekness and humility. So what is the humility of wisdom? So verse 6. But he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. So, but God gives grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. You are saved by grace. For those who turn back to him, he is so kind. And he's for those whose hearts are truly submitted in his direction, he will give us grace to make mistakes on our journey towards him. For even the submitted, and for like if you're walking in his direction, even if you trip and stumble to the side, he's going to pick you up and help you back up on your feet. So feed the right dog. Be the good ground that allows the seed to produce a rich harvest. Because when you do, you'll find that God is so much closer to your side than you realized. He's steadying your hand. He's giving you strength. He's bathing your heart in his truth, not the truth of the world. And when that happens, the devil will flee. He has no power over you. You're throwing off every single place where he could get a foothold and drag you down into his death-giving ways. There's an author that I quite like reading his books. He's called Joe Abercrombie. He doesn't write spiritual books at all. He writes sort of like fantasy things, like Lord of the Rings, that style book. But he shares a story about a piece of advice that he was given right at the beginning of when he started writing, and it was this: you've got to be honest. And he's so clever about how he carries this value into his writing, because he regularly shows his characters talking themselves around into thinking that they're doing things for noble reasons. And everyone apart from that character, including you as the reader, can see that their motivation is completely self-serving and completely unnoble. But they've talked themselves into a different place. And Jeremiah sums this up nicely. He says that the heart is deceitful above all things. We have to be honest with ourselves. But even then, we fail to do it in our own strength. We don't have the strength to be honest with ourselves. And that's the beauty of it, because we're not supposed to do it in our own strength. Like James to his friends in the early church, we need to invite or be open to the loving but honest words of trusted friends of character. But more than that, we need to invite and be open to the Spirit of God working within us. Search me, God, and know my heart. See if there is any wicked way within me, and lead me in the way everlasting. This is wisdom. James says, cleanse your hands, the outworking of the heart that in action is action born and grown. Purify your hearts, the double-minded insides that lead to either sin or right living with God. We just want to be wholly in the right living with God camp, because that leads to life and not death. So how does wisdom relate to relationships with others? Verse 11 says, don't speak evil against one another. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and destroy. But who are you to judge your judge your neighbor? Need some water. So, what he's saying is, don't speak evil against each other, because when you do, when you judge your neighbor, you're putting yourself in God's seat. So, in this text, James is actually drawing a line all the way from Genesis through the Old Testament to Jesus, and then kind of riffing on all of that. So, in Genesis, God says that we are made in his image, right? And then we move forward to Deuteronomy. Bear in mind that when God says he's made us in his image, he's saying that we're valuable, we matter. There's something beautiful about us in his eyes. And then in Deuteronomy, there's this verse which talks about love the Lord with everything you are. And then it says, tie that on your wrists, write it on your foreheads, write it on the city gates, that's the place where justice is done, and write it on your doors. What does that mean? It's a bit weird, isn't it? So you're all going to go home with, get out your permanent markers and start sort of writing on your face. You're not even going to have room to write it on your face. Unless you write very small, obviously. What does it mean? So write it on your wrists every time you do something. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Write it on your foreheads every time you see someone else. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Every time you go through your door and you're coming and you're going, love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself. The city gates, the place where justice is done, love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself. And then we get to Jesus, and he says everything is summed up in those 2 lines. 1 command, 2 parts. Love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself. He doesn't just say your neighbors. He says love your enemies, love those who would come to take you down. And he's not saying in that to be passive and to roll over and let your enemies stamp on you, but he gives these examples of resisting the power of and the attacks of the enemy, whilst responding in love, and raising that value and reminding everyone around you of the value of who you are and who they are. So he goes through several examples of this, but he basically just also uses that hyperbole to show how the heart and our actions are connected in what we do. And actually, just on an aside on this one, just because I think it really puts this point forwards really well. Does everyone know about sort of if someone strikes you, then turn the other cheek? Has everyone heard that before? Okay, because what we can kind of understand from that on the surface is that if someone hits you, then you just got to take it again. Yeah? And actually, it can kind of seem it's a bit countercultural, but also if you really take that to an extreme, it can lead to people being told to stay in abusive situations. And that's not what Jesus is saying. We've got to understand what's going on in that culture, what he's speaking to. So what he's saying is when someone strikes you with their right hand, they're backhanding you. And in that culture, what that says is that by backhanding you, I'm saying that you are less than me. It's not actually like an injury, it's a statement of value. It's saying, you are less than me. When he says, turn the other cheek, he's saying, I'm inviting you to hit me again, but now you have to hit me with the other side of your hand as an equal. And you have to accept that I am your equal. And it's actually, first of all, it puts the victim actually in a place of power themselves. It's saying, well, I'm choosing what happens to me. It also says it's an active resistance, but without resorting to striking the other person back in the same spirit. We're not resorting to the same spirit of evil and propagating that, but we're saying, no, you have to recognize me as an equal and recognize that I'm made in the image of God, you are made in the image of God. And I think the whole point is if someone's done that and suddenly someone turns their cheek, it's like this shocking thing. It's supposed to shock someone to thinking, oh, I'm treating you as less than myself. It almost forces that sin up into the light. So I was thinking about how to land this sermon. Initially, I'd planned to go through a whole bunch of topics in life and sort of give examples of how to live according to God's wisdom. And when I was chatting it through with Carmen, I kind of realized that would be missing the point entirely. Because wisdom isn't a set of rules. It's not a set of rules that we should be following and we should be doing, because we get back to this again. We get back to legalism. It's all about what we do on the outside. And it's actually a bit like being whitewashed tombs, as Jesus has said before. It's like we look great on the outside, but what's inside is empty. It's actually, it's not just empty, but it's actually full of death. It'll lead us to death if we're just trying to make us look right on the outside, but our hearts are full of the self-service of, well, I can earn my way, I can do it for myself, I can actually be God by saying what's right in my own eyes. So I'm not going to give a bunch of examples. The main reason is because wisdom is not a set of rules, wisdom is a person. And he's dynamic and he's speaking to us every day. Jesus is speaking to us every day. And following Jesus, following wisdom, may result in one action, one situation being right, but a completely opposite action in a very similar situation being right, because we're following a dynamic person of Jesus. We have to know him and we have to listen to him. We need to get down on our knees every day, get our hearts saturated in his truth, in his value system. But it doesn't stop there, because the hand feeds the heart, directs the hand. We need to get up off our knees and we need to walk. We need to walk in the truth of his character, of the grace that he has given. If we really believe something, it's going to look like action. We can tell what we believe by looking at our lives and looking at what we do, because what we believe will flow out of us. If we don't get up off our knees, and if we just stop here and just have this, we think, oh, that's really nice. That's really nice, isn't it? It's very cozy. James talks about it before. We're like a person who looks in the mirror and forgets what he looks like. It's gone this deep. It's the stony ground that we've allowed our hearts to be stony ground. If we truly believe this comes immediately afterwards. If we truly believe this has got to come out of it. Not because we're making it happen, but because it's like, if I plant a bunch of flowers in the ground, they're going to sprout and they're going to grow. It happens because that's what's deep buried within the seed. There is, if it's only gone surface deep, then it probably means that it's surrounded by the self-centered, self-serving, self-worshipping values of the world, if that's what we really believe. And there's as much life to be drawn from that as a seed will draw from the rock around it. But the value system of God, this is the good news, guys. The value system of God is rich soil. If we immerse ourselves in this, if we really, really stick both feet in, not 1 foot out, 1 foot in, both feet in, and we're saying, God, I surrender my heart, I surrender my life, my whole being. I love you, Lord, with my mind, with my soul, with my body, with my strength, with my life. And because of that, I will love those around me, my enemies and my friends and my neighbors and everyone I see. I will stop for the one in front of me. That will come out. That will grow all by itself. It is God-centered, rich soil. It is plugged into the source of all life. It cannot help but grow life. It is God-serving, so it is anchored by a strength that is not easily shaken or displaced. It is God-worshipping, so you will find your foundations aligned in order, a firm and trustworthy base on which to build your life. Even a single seed will grow and reproduce in you, feeding you and the communities around you with life. Because you are a son or a daughter of God. You are made in his image, and so is everyone else around you. So let's not leave today thinking, oh, that was a nice sermon. It's nice to think about those things, isn't it? But let's take an active part in truly believing these foundations and then getting up off our knees and walking it out. Are you living in the fullness of this identity? Do you know who you are?